And hi, everybody. Welcome to our Points in the Paint podcast covering WCC hoops presented by Hell of a Good Dip. Dave Fleming, Sean Farnham. Great to have you with us for another episode. We are absolutely jam-packed this week. This is our second to last episode, Sean, of this season. We have one more to go. You and I are going to record that immediately following the championship game in Las Vegas in a week. After the conference tournament championship is crowned, we'll have players, we'll have hopefully the winning coach, and that'll be the theme of our final show. This is our last show of the regular season. We've got the conference commissioner, Stu Jackson, ready to join us. Jeff Goodman from Field of 68, who's been covering college hoops for a long time. Seth Davis from CBS Sports. Awards from the regular season, Player of the Year, Coach of the Year to talk about. We have the bracket that's finalized of the conference tournament, so we got to get into it, Sean. We got a lot to get to tonight.
We got a hell of a lot to talk about on a hell of a good show. Dave, let me ask you the first and foremost. What's the hell of a good team of the week? That we got to get that out of the way right away. We cannot hesitate on that.
Yeah, I mean, and I would ordinarily just give it to St. Mary's because we're gonna rattle off the awards winners, and it's an impressive list of Gales, and they finished 3 games clear in the conference. Super impressive. I'm giving it to Gonzaga though.
Yep.
You and I were in Moraga a week ago, and the Zags, at home, I'm not saying they were dominated by St. Mary's, but they were stunned with the way that game ended, and they were wounded. And I think you and I both wondered how they would respond. They had 2 very difficult road games, quad 1 road games at Santa Clara, at San Francisco. They won both, and they won both going away, and their offense looked unstoppable. And good for the Zags. I mean, you and I laughed last week. Like, the idea that there was doubt that they were going to get into the NCAA tournament was silly, but some people were doubting them, and their seed is getting better and better as we go along.
2 quad 1 wins, Dave. 2 quad 1 wins on the road. Ryan Nembhard was absolutely sensational. Over 300 assists now on the season. Just his leadership and what he brought. I thought Ben Gregg, in particular, in the first half of that game at San Francisco was outstanding. This team, as we talked with Gary Parrish last week, the margins haven't been that big in defeat. They've been really, really close, and 3 or 4 possessions go a different way. All of a sudden, you're looking at a very different season for Gonzaga, and there's still time, obviously, with the conference tournament coming up this week in Las Vegas, and then headed into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, we've got Goodman, we've got Seth Davis. Yeah, we have limited time with each. Maybe one will lean heavy St. Mary's, one will lean heavy Gonzaga. We can decide which is which. But they are different, those 2 right now, which have separated themselves even in a spirited competitive year. The arc of their seasons have been very different. And I'm intrigued by Gonzaga going forward. I mean, you watch them play, and you mentioned Ben Gregg and Caleb Battle had 2 really nice games this week. And Nolan Hickman's playing some of the best ball that I've seen him play in his whole long Gonzaga career. We know Ike, we know Nembhard. I'm feeling like the Zags are dangerous here. I am.
Yeah, I mean, when do you want to count them out? Like, who counts out Gonzaga? The people that write stories counting out Gonzaga, like, I always laugh at, because I'm like, clearly you don't know Mark Few. Clearly you've never been around this program. And yes, I was stunned as we walked out of the McCarthy Athletic Center, because when the Zags tied that game up, I was like, oh, they're going to win the game now. And they didn't. And it was really the second time in these matchups where there's like almost the same identical game. St. Mary's gets off to a big start, Zags rally and cut it. And then the next thing you know, it's a 2-point game, it's a tie game, it's a 1-point lead, going back to either one of the 2 games. And then there's a run, and it just exploded. And I think that when you look at that, it's easy to get caught up in that. But then when you watch the way they competed against Santa Clara on Tuesday night, and how they played against San Francisco on Saturday inside the Chase Center, it was a leave no doubt. The Zags aren't going anywhere, and they're ready for Las Vegas. And now here we go. Buckle up. They're the 2 seed. The Gales are the 1, and we could be very easily talking about the 28th meeting in the last 10 years between those 2 schools. I mean, that means, like, yeah, it's almost every championship game has been with those 2 teams in it. Almost every single one of them. It's been absolutely incredible, and we could be in for another instant classic in Las Vegas, and I'm sure it'll be packed. I'm sure it'll be rocking.
It sure is feeling that way. And we'll say maybe a little quick tournament preview for the end. I did want to get to before we start loading up with all our guests. The WCC awards came
Yep.
out, and I maybe the first thing we should do is congratulate Austin Rapp because he's the only non-Gale, the only one. All the league awards swept by St. Mary's, other than Freshman of the Year, goes to the Portland forward that you and I talked to a couple weeks ago, Randy Bennett. Augustus Marciulionis, we sort of knew that one was coming. Mitchell Saxon's the Defensive Player of the Year for the second straight year. Marciulionis, the Player of the Year for the second straight year. That's elite company. The players who've done that 2 years in a row in this league, it is an elite. Wow, it really is. Impressive list. Polis Morauskas is the Newcomer of the Year. The Sixth Man of the Year, they carved out Mikey Lewis, an award for him. He's not the Freshman of the Year, but he's the Sixth Man of the Year. It's good to be a Gale here in 2025, isn't it?
It really is. And, you look at all those honors, and which one are you going to say that they didn't deserve? I mean, they dominated this conference with only one loss all season long. That came on the hilltop against USF in the deepest, strongest WCC that we've seen in decades. They were able to shine and go through the way they did. You mentioned Augustus Marciulionis, but let's just go through a couple of names, just a couple of the names. Bill Cartwright, Doug Christie, Steve Nash, Blake Stepp, Drew Timme. Those are just a couple of the names on the list of guys that were able to go back-to-back or two-time WCC Player of the Year. And more than just the numbers, to me, is his toughness and his leadership. When we had him on last week, he was sensational. And you get a sense of his true leadership and how he's an extension of Randy Bennett, but giving completely into the program and seeing his role as a person that had to get everybody up to speed last summer when you had a couple of guys leave via the transfer portal, when you had a veteran leader like an Alex Dukas go on to the professional ranks. He took that personally, that this was going to be his season to leave his mark on this program. And that's one of the brilliance of Randy Bennett. It kind of bleeds into Randy being Coach of the Year, is the empowerment of leadership from within that locker room has always been something that has really impressed me. Year after year, senior class after senior class, that program and that school matters to them. They leave. We can talk about Zags being Zags, Gales being Gales. The similarity, the one thing is, when you leave, man, you feel like you're leaving something that was really special. And St. Mary's has cultivated that. Randy Bennett has done a great job year after year empowering his group. And this year's class is no different. Mitchell Saxon is part of that as well. Of seniors, Luke Barrett, another one that truly, as they leave, will look and say, did we leave the program in a better place than it was when we got here? And the answer is yes, which is astounding because they were at an NCAA tournament level when all of those guys arrived onto campus. And yet here they are at a championship level in the WCC, back-to-back regular season outright titles. They're going to be wearing a home color uniform in the NCAA tournament again. And they've accomplished such incredible feats during their time in Moraga, and certainly this program is going to benefit from them as they move forward.
Yeah, pretty amazing. That's well said. I mean, I in a way, Sean, it's almost perfect that he didn't win a Player of the Week and he wins the Player of the Year, because to me, that's him. He shows up every week. It's not going to be, yeah. And in some ways, when you sign up to play for Randy Bennett, when you give your career to that program, a couple things. One, you're gonna become a better player. You are. I don't think there's an example I can think of somebody who showed up in Moraga and didn't become a much better player, maybe even the best version of themselves. But you also know you're gonna give up some of your statistical glory. You're not going there to pile up numbers. You're not going there to put up huge offensive stats. That's not what it's about there. And so in a way, it's perfect, I think, that Augustus Marciulionis wins the Player of the Year for the second straight year without winning a Player of the Week during the regular season. It's slow, it's steady, it's every night, it's consistency. That's what embodies that program. And as much as any player that I can remember who's worn that jersey, that embodies him. They've had a lot of great players. I have loved watching this guy play because he's everything that Randy wants to be embodied in one guy.
Yeah, and look, there's going to be people that'll sit there and say, well, Ryan Nembhard leads the nation in assists. You're right, he does. And I think had the Zags beat St. Mary's in one of the two games, I think there's a very legitimate argument to be made for Ryan Nembhard to be the conference player of the year. But when you lose both games and the championship is one going away before the final weekend is even played, I think you really have to look at that team at the top, and it was earned. It was earned. It was not given. It was earned with his stellar play, and that doesn't diminish what Ryan Nembhard accomplished this year, and nor should any WCC fan feel like it diminishes. There was a lot of really good individual talent and a lot of individual performances this year, but I think that one thing that I give the credit to the WCC for is seemingly when these coaches vote on these awards, and that's who votes on these awards, they take winning the conference championship and leadership and intangibles as part of it. We saw it last year when he got the award, and I think again this year the collection of all of his good stats, his improved three-point percentage, everything that you want to call out, it made him the conference player of the year and well-deserved.
We got to get to our break, but let me just run through and I'll get a quick reaction from you on the first team. All league, Hickman, E.K. Nembhard from Gonzaga, Adama Alpha-Ball from Santa Clara, Marshallonis Saxon Morauskas from St. Mary's, Michael Ratai from Oregon State had a terrific year, and then Malik Thomas and Marcus Williams, both from San Francisco. Quick thought on the first team?
All of them well-deserving of it. I think Ratai had a great season for Oregon State. I love the fact that the two San Francisco guards who put them in position to potentially get a 2 seed in the final weekend, had they been able to upset Gonzaga and win that game at the Chase Center. It's been a great year for Chris Gerlison's squad, and those two players in particular were the catalyst to it. So no problems with anybody on that list.
What a year in this league, and we got more to come. It's championship week. Sean and I will be in Las Vegas. We're going to talk about that later in the show. When we come back, our first guest, it's the commissioner of the West Coast Conference, Stu Jackson, on our Points in the Paint podcast right after this. All right, welcome back to our Points of the Paint podcast presented by Hell of a Good Dip. Dave Fleming, Sean Farnham. We have a packed show, as we mentioned on the top, and our first guest tonight as we wind up the WCC basketball season is the commissioner of this conference, a distinguished basketball career. Stu Jackson is nice enough to join us. And Stu, I guess I'll start by asking you, how much of your season has been spent listening to this silly podcast?
Well, not silly. And I want to thank both of you for the fine work that you've been doing throughout the, each week. It's,
I believe, hold on, Mr. Commissioner, with all due respect, I think we call it hell of a good content.
Hell of a good content.
That this is brought to you by Hell of a Good Dip. All right, please go ahead.
And you two are a hell of a good pair. Head up the WCC podcast. So I just want to thank you for it.
Well, we do care about the league, and we have really enjoyed this league season. Sean and I have been around this conference for a long time, and we've said this a bunch of times on this podcast, Stu, that we can't remember. It's funny how it worked out. St. Mary's ends up winning the league by 3 full games. Looks like a sort of a domination, and yet it felt like such a balanced and deep conference this year. Just as a big picture beginner, what did you think of the conference season overall?
I thought the conference season unfolded the way that we had anticipated at the beginning. With the addition of Oregon State and Washington State, it really added a lot of depth and breadth to the conference and contributed to a different level of competitiveness on a weekly basis, which I think, will serve our members well, particularly those that are going into postseason play. I mean, by way of example, when's the last time that Gonzaga's finished the conference, one needing quad one wins and being able to actually secure 2 quad one wins in their last 2 games? I don't know that that's happened in the past. So it's just been, I think, an outstanding year for the conference.
What is your vision of seeing what happened this year for this conference to be able to continue to elevate this conference and keep it at the level that it's going?
If we're fortunate enough to add an additional member or additional members, that they be members that contribute strongly to all of our sports, but especially in the sports of women's and men's basketball. We've seen one result this season. In a perfect world, it would have been great that going into the conference tournament, that we would have been assured of perhaps 3 bids in the NCAA tournament. But we still may get there. But again, we wouldn't even be in that position, quite frankly, without a stronger and deeper conference. And it's incumbent upon us as we look at the conference in the future that we focus on our original objective, and that is to continue to try to build the overall strength of our existing members. But as importantly, if we add members, they need to be members that add basketball strength for both the women and the men.
Talking to Stu Jackson here on our Points in the Paint podcast. Just as a follow up to that, you've taken a leadership role, haven't you? I mean, it seems like you've been willing to speak out. We talked about some of your comments earlier in the season, sort of generally directed towards college athletics as a whole and where conferences like yours fit in the changing landscape. Are you comfortable in a leadership position, being someone who is willing to speak about these issues, relating to your conference, but relating to the college athletics landscape as a whole?
Well, I'm comfortable in a sphere of injustice, which is what, I feel that conferences like ours have suffered, over the, over the past months. First with the process of the House settlement and, the damages that conferences like ours incurred as a result of the defendants being the NCAA and the Power Five conferences. But the process just felt a little clunky to me, only to be repeated once again and currently when we're in this phase of redefining NCAA governance and implementation of what that governance would look like. We find ourselves once again in a position where we are in the dark, waiting for, as I termed it, the tablets to be handed down. And it's uncomfortable in terms of planning. It's an uncomfortable process and a lack of foresight and leadership of those in power. And that's an area that I'm comfortable with and I don't quite frankly enjoy. So because of that, I just feel it's necessary to bring it to people's attention because we don't know what the outcomes are going to be, whether it be, access to tournaments, whether it be the cost of opting in or opting out of the settlement, revenue sharing, and roster limits. And, I just think it's important that people are aware what's been happening and what potentially could be.
I think you bring up so many great points there, and to me, the NCAA tournament and including conferences like the WCC matter. It's what makes the NCAA tournament, what makes March Madness March Madness. In fact, there would be no Gonzaga if there wasn't 1999 and that tournament run, right? Like that was the starting point that has now led to them becoming a national power that everybody knows. And Randy Bennett has certainly benefited from his multiple NCAA tournament appearances as well. Do you see the WCC's footing and conferences like the WCC having to fight harder now to make sure that they'll be included as the power conferences kind of rally around each other moving forward into how they perceive this new landscape of NIL?
In a short answer, yes, it's becoming more difficult. One, as you mentioned, Sean, just in terms of the resources that mid-major conferences have in comparison to the Power Four conferences. There's a disparity. It's fortunate that we're in the sport of basketball, though, because if you have a program that is well managed, that has an eye for talent, has the ability to develop players quickly, and you get a little bit lucky, you're always going to be able to compete even at the highest level. And that's fortunate. What we can't control, though, is the fact that these conferences, I'll call them mega conferences, have gotten much larger. And because of the way the criteria are structured for access into the men's and women's tournament, where your basketball resume is so vitally important, you're going to see, and it's going to be highlighted this year, in many of those power conferences, teams that gain access to March Madness in the tournament, many of those teams will, by way of example, have records around 500, or even worse yet, conference records that are below 500. But by virtue of their resume and their strength of schedule and the ability to have more opportunities at high level games and being successful in some of those games, their resumes are going to be worthy for NCAA participation, unfortunately, to the detriment of teams in mid-major conferences that perhaps have better records, and you could argue maybe better teams because they've had that ability to perform consistently. They're going to be left out in the cold in a way perhaps that we haven't seen in recent years.
Final couple minutes with Stu Jackson, Commissioner of the West Coast Conference. Couple days before the conference tournaments get started in Las Vegas. On the men's side, what are you expecting to see in Vegas?
Well, it's going to be a barn burner, Dave. I don't know what to tell you. And that's on the women's side and the men's side. Already, I'm intrigued by the first 4 seeds in our conference tournament. But by the same token, I think a 5th or 6th seed in our tournament could, in fact, make a legitimate run. I wish, this year, for the first time, I wish we didn't have our triple bye bracket, because I think if we had a different type of bracket where we had 8 teams in the quarterfinals, and all 8 teams were required to play in the quarterfinals, I think things could perhaps been even more interesting than they're going to be come next week in Vegas.
The Orleans Arena has been a staple for this conference and the conference tournament. Fans from all over the WCC have flocked to Vegas and made this one of the most loudest tournaments that you can find anywhere. Dave and I have been on the call of many of these championship games and some of these semifinals as well that have just been so memorable. What do you want fans to leave Las Vegas experiencing and leaving with this idea of Champ Week with the WCC?
Well, first of all, Sean, I mean, New Orleans has been a great partner of ours for 17 years, and we're going to obviously make the most of our stay this year. But there've been some memorable moments in that arena, and undoubtedly, this week's tournament will provide even more memorable moments. And we're keeping our fingers crossed that we're going to be filled to the brim on Monday and Tuesday night. We're very, very close from a ticket sales standpoint. But I think the atmosphere that will be generated, I think fans will take that home with them and hopefully see some great basketball and come back again next year.
Last thought, Stu, before we let you go. I mean, to me, in some ways, this year is going to be remembered as, at least the regular season, the year of the Gales. I mean, St. Mary's pretty amazing. And the individual performances, the level of coaching, the player development that you talked about, and just the high level winning. How impressed have you been with Randy Bennett's team this year?
Well, I'll share with you what I said to Randy. I called and congratulated him on the regular season championship, but more importantly, I just heartfelt. I truly enjoyed watching his team play, and the reason is they're like a surgeon. They pick you apart. They can perform over a long period of time. They grind it out. with just such precision. They're great defensively. They're physical. They can rebound the basketball. Offensively, they share the basketball. They take good shots. Mentally, they have a stick-to-itiveness that is unwavering. And those are the qualities that I like to see in a basketball team. In a phrase, they just make everybody uncomfortable to play. And, but once again, when they get to the NCAA tournament, as we all know, it's all about the matchups. But I think the margin of teams that would present a problem for them is small with this basketball team. I mean, they're long, they have great size, they have a great mixture of more veteran players and younger players, and I just love their team. So that's how I feel about it.
Stu, we met for the very first time in Las Vegas when you were announced as the commissioner. I sat down with you in one of the back rooms at the Orleans Arena, and I asked you then, what's the ideal number of teams that you could see in the West Coast Conference? And you alluded to you'd like to see somewhere around 12. Where are you at in approaching conference expansion for the WCC?
Well, I can tell you, we're still in discussions and discovery. And you're correct. I mean, our goal is to add 1 to 3 teams. There's no timetable. If we were to get to 3 members, it could be 1 member initially, 2 later, 2 initially, 1 later. But ideally, our presidents would like to get to 12 teams. What we don't want to do is remain as a 9-team conference come 2026 upon the exit of Washington State, Oregon State, and Gonzaga. So we're working towards that goal. That's the vision, and we'll get there. But it hasn't been without a lot of effort by a lot of people to try and make that happen.
Your job is not boring these days. It's not easy. It's not boring. Hopefully, though, you've really enjoyed this conference season. We sure have. Stu, we'll see you in Vegas.
All right, look forward to seeing you guys.
Commissioner of the West Coast Conference. We've got 2 more guests to come on the show. Jeff Goodman, Seth Davis. We'll come back with more right after this. All right, we're back here on our Points in the Paint podcast, presented by a hell of a good dip, and we promised a packed show. Thanks to Stu Jackson, the commissioner of the WCC, for joining us. And our next guest probably really needs no introduction. If you're a college basketball fan, you know Jeff Goodman. He has covered this sport as thoroughly as anybody over the last couple decades. Jeff is the co-founder of the media company Field of 68. But Jeff, it's great to talk to you. Have you enjoyed college? Sean and I are focusing on WCC, but just a big picture question. Have you enjoyed this college hoop season?
Yeah, once it started. I hate the off season now, and I'm dreading the portal and the coaching changes and all that. But, once November 4th got here and we did our event to start off the season in Sioux Falls, and Santa Clara was a part of that, that's when I got excited, and you can kind of turn the page and all the BS that is the off season. And, listen, I'm all for kids getting compensated, but some of these guys, I just don't think deserve what they got, number one. And I think a lot of them that came back to school came back for the money, and you're seeing it throughout the season that a lot of them don't really want to be in college. There's a lot of kids that are only in college because they couldn't get to the NBA, and you're watching them now and they're kind of checked out. Not a ton, but some.
Sean, let me just follow up real quick, because in a weird way, I think it's a good segue into what the two of us talk about week to week. It has put the WCC and conferences like the WCC in an awkward position, because in some ways it feels like they're being left out from a lot of this stuff. In some ways it feels like all these mega conferences, power conferences, are sort of conspiring against leagues like the WCC. And yet the flip side is kind of what you were referring to. Is I don't want to be overly romantic about it, but we have college hoops here where you have kids who want to be at these schools playing hard every night. And you've got St. Mary's and Gonzaga and San Francisco and Santa Clara, teams that have had really good years, historically good years for some of those programs. It is, in a weird way, a time in this sport where schools like these WCC teams can shine in a different way than the stuff that you're talking about.
No, there's a sense of purity with some of the leagues, like the WCC, like the Atlantic 10, like maybe the AAC. Some of those leagues that aren't paying kids, $2 million, right? It's true. I mean, there's some guys that are getting paid. We know at Gonzaga, but for the most part, within the league, there is a sense it's refreshing. And again, when I was around those kids at Santa Clara on November 4th, I felt good about the sport. We did that event for a lot of the best mid-majors, right? College of Charleston, and they're making some money. College of Charleston's best player, Ante Berzovic, is making, $350,000, $400,000. That's a ton of money, especially for kids that age. But it's certainly different with the SEC money, with the Big Ten money. I'm watching Umar Ballo, who started his career at Gonzaga, and then went to Arizona, now at Indiana. And I'm seeing, it's like this, guys. His effort is like this. You don't know. He got paid, and is he as motivated as he was before? Well, some nights he looks like he is and, wants to be an NBA player. And other nights he looks like he'd rather be somewhere else.
Speaking on the WCC, and let's focus in on that now. To me, you look at the way the conference played out this year. Randy Bennett loses 3 players that were immensely important a season ago, whether it was Joshua Jefferson, who missed the NCAA tournament due to the knee injury, but was a great player for him. Aiden Mahaney clearly was a very valuable part of that. Alex Dukas goes on to the next level. He comes back this year, and everybody was kind of like, well, what are they going to be? And the answer was better. They were going to be better. And they were going to be better because of his leadership and his staff's ability to go out and bring in a player like Morauskas, bring in a player like Mikey Lewis, and go, we're fine, let's go. What has impressed you most about Randy Bennett and the Gales this season?
I mean, first of all, let's never, ever, 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 ever doubt Randy Bennett. Like I say it all the time, he's probably the most underrated coach in America. And when you go to his practices, and I know you guys have been, and I've been several times too, it is a clinic. It is an absolute clinic to watch Randy Bennett. If you can do it, which I don't know if he allows people in. I think we're the fortunate ones who get to go in and
I'm going to
watch
say that's
him
a hard
practice.
no.
All right, that's a hard no. He's not Lon Kruger, right? He's not Lon Kruger allowing anybody to go in and watch his practice. But if you can somehow sneak your way in, trust me, like it is one of – I've been to so many practices. I would say this, it's as good as it gets. He is the ultimate teacher. He is the ultimate ball coach. And again, I think part of it is what you said, Sean, staff stability and those guys playing for him and knowing what you want to recruit to Randy Bennett's, not just his playing style, but his coaching style. And again, you look at what he got with Morauskas, coming in. Obviously, he didn't play a lot for Arizona. Yeah, and even Augustus, like I remember seeing him a couple years ago and being like, all right, this kid's going to be a star. Then he had kind of a down year, right? A down sophomore year, and he bounced back. Player of the year last year, probably won it again this year, I would think. But I remember a conversation I had with Randy and Rock Hill. AU, we were there for watching AU ball, and I sat next to him, and I said, I'm like, Randy, man, like, you lose Mahaney, you lose Jefferson. I'm like, man, like, how you doing? He's like, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Don't you worry. And I'm like, really? And sure enough, again, you guys know if there's anybody you can trust to win games, and he's probably, they're going to go their 4th straight NCAA tournament in Moraga. And again, people haven't been there. They don't know. Like, it's insane.
Like, shouldn't Randy Bennett get more shine? He may not win the award, but shouldn't he get more shine as being the National Coach of the Year in college basketball this year?
Hell yeah. Yeah, you're right. I don't know why we don't put him in that conversation, because they just ran the WCC. They just went 17-1 in the WCC. You know how hard that is to do in a league that is, again, has been dominated by Gonzaga for so many years. And I love the mix that he's got with this team. Again, you've got a bunch of veterans, Marciulionis, Saxon, Barrett. You've got some young kids who are coming up that, again, Jordan Ross is going to be terrific, and Mikey Lewis. Those guards are going to be ready next year to take that jump and make sure this program never skips a beat, no matter what. And they'll add they might add a transfer here or there, but they're going to do it with homegrown guys that they've evaluated, they've developed, and they're going to find a way to retain for less money than a lot of other places because of Randy Bennett.
Yeah. Talking to Jeff Goodman here. All right. So I think a good follow-up, Jeff, is the Zags been to 9 straight Sweet 16s. And it is we're talking about 2 different programs, 2 different sort of levels of development over a long period of time. But St. Mary's has been to 1 Sweet 16, and they haven't been able to break through in the NCAA tournament the way that the Zags have consistently. Can this year's team be the team to sort of start doing that for the Gales?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're so good on the glass this year. That gives them a major advantage that I think a lot of other teams can't really match up. Saxon is just a beast on the glass. And again, they've got really good guards. They can score, but they're so good defensively. And they have been. And that's something that I think has been overlooked over the last few years. Everybody thinks of St. Mary's. What do they think of? Just a bunch of dudes that can shoot it and spread the floor and maybe a big here or there, but not a great defensive team. This team can really, really get after you and guard. And again, on the other end, they can score well enough.
That's also what makes St. Mary's St. Mary's. Their leadership and the way that Randy Bennett has empowered Augustus Marciulionis, Mitchell Saxon, and Luke Barrett to take the reins of this team and say, hey, go. And they've gone 17-1 in the deepest WCC, maybe in the history of the conference.
Jeff, you're a busy man. We really appreciate the time.
I love you guys. Love you guys. Miss you guys.
Jeff Goodman, thanks for being with us. We'll come back with more right after this. All right, welcome back to our Points in the Paint podcast, presented by Hell of a Good Dip. Dave Fleming, Sean Farnham, our next guest. We told you it was a packed show. CBS Sports, Turner Sports, Fox Sports, Hoops HQ. We're going to let him plug all the stuff that he does. He is one of the true greats covering this sport. Seth Davis, nice enough to join us here on our podcast. I love the hat, Seth, by the way.
Yeah, we were just saying, Stu Jackson and Leslie Ann Wade and everybody at the West Coast Conference, thank you. As a member of the media, if you give me something free to wear, to eat, to drive, if you want to send me a car with a big West Coast Conference logo on it, I'll be happy to drive around Los Angeles on the 405.
All right, I want to start there because this conference and you, and one school in particular, has just gone off on a complete tangent since you uttered 3 words. And what are those 3 words, Mr. Davis?
Zags got dudes.
The Zags got dudes.
Yeah.
When you said it, did you know it was going to be the recruiting announcement for the rest of all time and that it was just going to continue to be this thing?
I did not know, and I'm still waiting for Mark Few to send me my NIL money. So if you could make that happen, I'd appreciate it. So there's this thing, Sean, I don't know, you might know about this. It's called Twitter. I don't know what it's now, right? But this whole social media thing. So I do a lot of silly things on Twitter. The whole Sharpie bit started with the inside joke between me and Greg Gumbel in the studio, little pet phrases and whatever. And I guess for whatever reason, I was saying that about. I think the underlying point is just the notion of, I think the Gonzaga story is so underappreciated. I don't know of another example in the world of sports. I guess maybe Boise State football maybe had a moment, but they had that initial run way back in 1998, I believe it was. And that certainly happened before, where mid-major conferences catch the lightning in a bottle, but then the bottle breaks, the lightning goes out. And in that case, Dan Monson goes to Minnesota. That should have been the end of the story, and it wasn't. And it still isn't. So, that was just my way of kind of pounding the table and letting people know that this is not just somehow the slipper doesn't still fit, as my buddy Gus Johnson said, right? I mean, they are a juggernaut and a powerhouse. I know maybe this hasn't been quite the season they've had in the past, but what is it, 9 straight Sweet 16s? I mean, I wouldn't be shocked in the least for it to be 10, which is incredible. And
Yeah.
that's my point. Gonzaga
And anywhere.
6 teams. Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible what they've done. Very underappreciated.
Fully underappreciated nationally. And it's funny, Seth, there's a good segue because the Zags, the record isn't as gaudy this year. They don't win the conference regular season. St. Mary's ends up beating them by 3 games in the WCC regular season. And yet, here we are on the verge into March, Champ Week, NCAA Tournament Selection Sunday looming now. They're 8th in the net, somewhere thereabouts. It changes day to day. The computers really love them. They had a great week last week to finish the regular season, and it feels like maybe after some ups and downs, maybe the Zags are ready to be the Zags again in March.
Well, like I said, nothing would surprise me about this program and this team, and given the players they have, given the coach they have, they haven't had really any bad losses. Overtime to Oregon State, that's not a terrible loss. Santa Clara is a good team. And then of course you mentioned the St. Mary's and the crazy schedule that he always plays. And I think they're going through, it's interesting. I was just talking to Bill Self later this evening, if I may name drop. I'm a very effective name dropper. Just about like we talk about culture, right? And how these programs have thrived because of culture. Well, a big part of culture is you have seniors who've been there for a while. So they explain to the juniors what the deal is, and the juniors tell the sophomores, and the sophomores tell the freshmen. So the culture isn't just about the coach and or the coaching staff. You have to have some level of continuity. Gonzaga has actually had more of that than a lot of these programs, but you're still relying on transfers. Last year bringing in Graham Ike, bringing in Ryan Nemhard from Creighton. Sometimes it takes a year or two. And now, with Khalif Battle, it's been a little bit up and down with him. This is his 3rd school. And so you almost kind of wondered, well, how's he going to fit into that culture? And so they're still figuring that out. Even though it's March, they are figuring this out. But the point is the talent is there. Like they don't have to have this low margin for error because they don't have as much talent as these other teams. Almost every team they play, except for, the top few, they're going to be at least, level with them in terms of talent and maybe even have a little bit of an advantage. So can they make that all fit? And of course, the big question with that this year has been their defense is not what I would call championship level defense. I think you guys would agree with that, but I think it's plausible and I think it can get better. I know they got the international kid they've been giving a little bit more, Innocenti, they've been giving him a little bit more time to shore that up. So, yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, like I said, it wouldn't shock me.
You mentioned Coach Self. Let's focus on Coach Few. He's a finalist for the Naismith Hall of Fame. The thought process is he could very easily be a first ballot elected Hall of Fame member. If it's not this time, we certainly know it's coming very soon. During this run and the consistency in which he has led this program with to the gold medal in which he was part of with Team USA over the summer in Paris, what stands out most to you from your position in all these years of covering college basketball about Mark Few and his leadership style?
I think it's an unbelievable example of what we mean by the word fit. Mark Few, no matter where he would be a really good basketball coach because he's been doing it a long time and he has a growth mindset and he's a great guy and he's doing it for all the right reasons. And don't let the smooth taste fool you, man. He is a competitor. He really, really likes to win and he really, really doesn't like to lose like a lot of these guys. But I also, Sean, I would widen the lens. I've told this story in various forms. I wrote a really long story several years ago at The Athletic about the Gonzaga story. And it's a great example of, the coach is obviously very important, but the coach is just one piece of the puzzle. And there are other pieces that go beyond the program, the university leadership, and the commitment that a university makes in all aspects of supporting a basketball program. The fans, the boosters, the city. I mean, a city like Spokane is perfect because it's a good sized city. I mean, it's a real city. It's not a little college town, but of course there's no pro sports there. no major pro sports there. And so there was a space there, and I know it was part of a sort of a downtown development, getting the arena going and what have you, and investing in Gonzaga basketball. Many years they tried football, it didn't work out. And so when they first, they told me that story about, and the gentleman's name escapes me, is the former president and father of the university who went blind. And he and Mark Few met to go see this wealthy booster. This was right after the initial run with Dan Monson. And they thought they were going to ask for money to donate this and that. And Mark Few said, no, we need an arena. He said, what do you mean? He kind of laid out why we need an arena and the benefit and why it's a good business investment. And so the president was on board with it. And they went to the wealthy donor and they explained we need an arena, and they got the arena done. So it really requires that level of a commitment, because then when these other schools come calling, Mark Few doesn't have to say, well, I like what we have here, but I want something more, so I have to go get it somewhere else. They were able to convince him, no, everything you want is right here. And by the way, you can do your fishing and you can do your biking and you can have a great family life and be home for dinner. Even though I know Marcy wants to kick him out of the house most of the time. So it's just a great template that all levels of programs and universities, I think, should follow. That, hey, if you want to make this great, it requires full buy-in beyond the head coach. And then when it goes wrong, don't just think you can change your head coach and think you're going to fix everything, because that's not enough.
Talking to Seth Davis here. Well said. And it is amazing because you got Mark Few and 26 years in one place, one program, huge success. And Randy Bennett, 24 years, one place, huge success. Totally different circumstance, St. Mary's and Gonzaga, but it's a rare thing these days with Coach K having retired, Roy Williams, Jim Boeheim, so many of the greats having moved on. Those two battling head-to-head year after year. It's kind of become a unique thing in college basketball. You used to be a little bit more of that. Judd Heathcote and Bobby Knight or whoever. There were lots of examples in the old days. It's kind of the two who are left who are going head to head year after year.
Yeah, there's not many of them, and of course, it's not going to last forever. We know that, but I think they got a really good team. I was actually watching them on Synergy a little bit this morning. This is what I do when I have my morning coffee. I try to catch up on things. And, it's interesting, Randy, and actually Mark as well, and Tommy Lloyd, of course, is a big part of this, but Randy was really one of the first to really understand the opportunities that international basketball presented. Of course, it was mainly Australia, but now he's got a couple Lithuanians on his team. And so it's that ability to think outside the box. Like, all right, we're not going to beat UCLA and USC for these guys, but they don't, the thing about international recruiting is it's much more about managing the labyrinth of eligibility and contracts and clubs and all that, especially, before the rules. I think the rules may be a little bit looser now, but it's still a web, and it's cultural differences and it's language differences and understanding, who's even interested in coming over. And so that requires a lot of just sort of legwork to establish that network of contacts.
I have to think, Seth, St. Mary's is the only school that had a Lithuanian night this year.
No, I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that.
Lithuanian night. They played the national anthem. They gave out
That's awesome.
It's like he leans into it. It's smart.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
smart.
Super smart. Well, those guys can play too. Marshallonis, those guys can really play. So it's just thinking outside of the box, thinking creatively, and now with all this NIL and the transfer portal and everything, everything's, you feel it's kind of leveling out a little bit. Like, these coaches hiring general managers, thinking about their programs as businesses more than sports teams, how they put their roster together, how they protect their culture. I think it's a very, very interesting time. But the point being, in so many ways, Randy Bennett was well ahead of his time. And that's why he got that clock going early. And that's why they are good year after year after year. They don't have any dips anymore. He's got, I know it's a lot of work and it's not autopilot, but he's established a level of consistency that's rare at any level of college basketball.
And one last question for me, Seth, is to go back from a WCC perspective now to a national perspective, because of the seat you'll be sitting in for the entire month of March, taking us through the best of the college basketball season. I mean, that music hits and Selection Sunday comes, and as a former player, I can just tell you, when that music hits, everybody starts buzzing. Everybody gets hyped in the locker room, waiting to see where their name's going to pop up, where we're going to go play. Because back in the day, you also didn't have like the regionalized thing. We just go wherever the heck they sent us. But as you get set to sit on that seat again and be on our TV for a month, what are your thoughts on this year's college basketball season, and what stands out most to you?
Well, the first thing I'm thinking about, I gotta make sure I get my sleep, right? So the stuff that I say isn't too stupid. Listen, I mean, it's like sometimes you have these incredible tournaments, Sean, or these great days of the tournament, and they say, well, yeah, but put it in perspective. This is the best tournament since when? And my answer is always the same. This is the best tournament since last year. There's so many games. People forget that a lot of those games are very forgettable and not real entertaining and not real good, or they're not well played, or they're not close. I mean, you have these certain years we're in the studio and it's like, gosh, nothing's really exciting to happen. I'm always like, just wait. And then like you'll have a window where 3 or 4 utterly bonkers things are going to happen. So you got to watch.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. Seth Davis, thank you very much.
Love you guys. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Good seeing you, Seth. Enjoy
Okay.
March.
All right, we'll wrap up our Points of the Pain podcast right after this. All right, back here for our final segment. It's our Points of the Pain podcast covering WCC hoops, presented by a hell of a good dip. Dave Fleming, Sean Farnham. Okay, it's just the two of us for a last couple.
Thank God. I couldn't deal with another, person that just wanted to pontificate about how much basketball knowledge they had. I'm just kidding.
At least you and I are honest about how little we know.
What? Who's this? Are you Dave Fleming? I'm Sean. Hi, nice to meet you.
Anyway, it's fun to have Stu, Jeff, Seth. We really appreciate all our guests. But now you and I flip the page.
Yep.
I'll be there Thursday. You'll be there Sunday. We've got tons of great games in Vegas. Zags 2, San Francisco 3, Santa Clara 4. Oregon State is the 5 seed. Washington State's the 6 seed. How do you see the tournament playing out?
I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be very well balanced, highly competitive from top to bottom. I think there's so many teams that we're going to see some upsets. When are those upsets going to occur? Are they going to occur on Saturday? Are they going to happen on Sunday? Are they going to happen on Monday night and lead us into maybe a bid stealing situation? It's been a long time when you and I have covered this that we could say this is a bid stealing win for a team. Could we see that happen on Monday night due to what after some upsets to see what happens on Tuesday's championship game? Maybe this year has been a little bit more wide open. I do think that obviously Gonzaga and St. Mary's have separated themselves. I think the way they performed over the course of the season, in particular the Zags with their closing week, certainly have put themselves already in the NCAA tournament along with St. Mary's. It's going to be wild, partner. I just hope that the students show up for all these other schools. I hope that the fans and the students come to Vegas and understand how amazing this is. If you told me, though, by the way, Dave, that Wayne Tinkle's team goes to Las Vegas and all of a sudden shows up on Tuesday night, that wouldn't surprise me at all, just so you know. I mean, he's done it before, right? Like he did it in the Pac-12 and then went to an Elite Eight in that 2021 NCAA tournament. It would not surprise me if all of a sudden they got hot and their zone disrupted somebody that didn't shoot the ball well, and the next thing you know, Oregon State's playing on Tuesday night. But they're going to have to get after it because they're going to have consecutive game after game after game after game to get there. And so endurance is going to be more of a reality this year. There's no off day on Sunday like we've had in the past, which if you're an old school like you and I are, last 15 years covering this tournament, that was usually Sunday was off day. Some people would go to NASCAR. You and I would go have massages, play golf, and then to have a 5-star dinner. But that was just kind of more our style and our speed.
Yeah, forget the NASCAR. I like your call. I do. Well, first of all, you're right. And it's funny, Oregon State, Washington State, the two newcomers this year, the two teams that came for the Pac-12 to the WCC, they're playing on Saturday. They're in the third round. They're not even into the quarterfinals. So it tells you about how this league season went for them. But I think you might have circled the right team. I mean, you and I know Santa Clara can do it. Santa Clara starts in the quarterfinals. They can win 3 games in a row. Oregon State should have beaten San Francisco this past week. absolutely could have beaten St. Mary's in Moraga. I could see the Beavers being a team that come Tuesday night, you and I are leading into that broadcast going, there are a lot of teams around the country watching this game thinking that it needs to go one way to save a spot in the NCAA tournament. I could see that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that could very easily be the case. I will say this too, and you and I have done this, and I know we've got one more coming up from Las Vegas right after the championship game. You and I are going to do a podcast from there. That will be our final one of the season here. I would say this, you, sir, are a pleasure to work with, and you're one of the most talented voices in college athletics and professional baseball and everything. And to get to do this with you this season has been an absolute blast. And the fact that you and I are back together again, as we so often have been over the last 15 years in Las Vegas, to document the amazing performances that we are going to see. And we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that Ford Ross game where both went for over 40 in the quarterfinals on a Saturday night in Las Vegas in a game that never wanted to end. We're going to have some of those moments coming up this week, and I'm fortunate that my seat is next to you. You are more than just a hell of a broadcaster. You're a hell of a good friend, too. And I'm excited that we're going to be back in Vegas in the Orleans Arena to document these student athletes and these coaches and their journey and their quest. You know, people say, well, you know, we wish the tournament would expand, the NCAA tournament. It already has with these conference tournaments. All right, you want to get into the NCAA tournament field, win. It's that simple. Win now, and you're in. There's no complaining about it. If you didn't win enough games during the course of the regular season, so what? You're out, and you'll go to the NIT, or you go to the Crown, or you go to the CBI, the CBT, or you just go, we're done. That's fine too. But if you want to play in the NCAA tournament, this is the moment for all of these teams, all of these players, all the things that we left Spokane. Oh my gosh, Gonzaga, are they gonna now all of a sudden 1 week later they could go to the Sweet 16 again? Like it can, like that, it can change. And who's going to be most dialed in these short turnarounds? That's one of the things that people don't think about in these conference tournaments, the short turnarounds. You play on a Saturday night, you got to play on a Sunday night, got to play on a Monday night, got to get to a Tuesday night. Like, what's your messaging to your team? How well are they processing that information in order to be at their best? What's your recovery plan like? What's your trainer doing? What's your nutritionist doing in talking about your student athletes and what they have to do to be ready to go the following night? Because that is the endurance test of Champ Week. And that's what makes it so much fun. And you and I, partner, we're going to have a hell of a good time.
You know, I feel the same way. I think it's a good place to end. I have enjoyed this. I have. I mean, I hope it comes across that you and I, we love college basketball. We love this league. We love the teams, coaches, players in this league. And this is now our week to get to watch them one last time. Next year is going to come around, and you and I will care about the WCC again. But these teams, these players, these coaches, this is it for this group. And it's been a great year in this league. And I can't wait for Las Vegas in a few days. Can't wait.
Viva Las Vegas with some hell of a good French onion dip.
Warming up his voice. That's Sean Farnham. I'm Dave Fleming. Our one last episode, Tuesday night championship night. Don't miss it. Until then, follow us from Vegas all week long. Thanks, everybody.